Hey everybody, my name is Al Nicoletti. Welcome to the Al Nicoletti Show. I'm an attorney here in Florida, and I bring guests on the show that are real estate super investors, rising rock stars, movers and shakers, and leaders of clubs in their community that educate, entertain, and inspire all things real estate on how you can take your company to the next level. On today's show, I have a great guest. He's from the Florida Panhandle area. I consider him a super investor. I've seen him on really big name shows, on the Real Estate Disruptor shows. We talked a while ago, back in March, before the COVID coronavirus hit. His name is Tyler Austin. Super investor, really knows his stuff, been in the game for a while, and he is going to share some really deep stuff with you and really get down in the things he wants to talk about. But I'm going to bring him on and we are going to cover some really cool stuff. And one of those things he's going to talk about is sharing the myths of how you don't need data all the time. You just need to properly understand the market of the data so you have proper data management. And he's going to talk about how to make more revenue by something like the go, no go process of digging into your data. Things that many people, investors, may have never heard about, but Tyler's really figured it out with some of the things he's worked with. And we're just going to have a resource case study coming out of the go, no go process and 10 steps on how McLean made $165,000 from 47 phone calls. These are things that are very different, very out there. So I'm excited to bring them on. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so happy to be here, man.
Yeah, finally we're able to connect. I know we were trying back in March, but it's funny how things roll. And, the whole COVID situation kind of forced us to do a lot of these Zooms, to do a lot of this stuff that normally, probably a year ago, you and I wouldn't be connecting doing this. And now we get to do a show and hear everything about you. So, for our audience, for the guest and everybody watching, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you were doing in the pre-real estate life, and kind of where you've transitioned now.
Yeah. So I was born in a little coal area in Pennsylvania, Pottsville, Pennsylvania, in Schuylkill County. So I was there for my youth, and then moved down to just above Tampa. My family kind of relocated down there. Joined the military, signed on a dotted line when I was 16. Left when I was 17. And then that kind of started my life, I guess, as a grown man, if you will, or at least a man that's going around trying to figure things out. So I did that, the whole military and government gig for about 8.5 years total. A portion of that, about 6 years of that being active, 5.5 or 6 years being active, going up to Alaska, North Dakota, been to Guam, Hawaii, all that kind of stuff. Never deployed overseas or nothing like that, but that's kind of like where my core experiences were in the cold. And that's why I'm back in Florida, because I did not enjoy negative 80-degree weather. Wasn't my thing. Um, and but yeah, so that was kind of my main thing. Now I'm located, like I said, like you said, Northwest Panhandle. My market is from Pensacola down to Panama City. It's my core market. About 6 counties there. We also market in most of Alabama and Pinellas County as well. But my company name's Florida Cash Real Estate on the real estate side. So we're really trying to build up that all of Florida presence. Let's see. That's kind of like the snapshot version of kind of where I was. I was military guy, government, turned real estate. Now with a real estate investment company and a software company.
So, what have you noticed about that panhandle market that's something different than the Pinellas market, maybe the Tampa market, that you could shed some light on? Because a lot of the audience that's watching this is going to be either in the Jacksonville market, the East Coast market, and who knows, may want to dip into that area. What do you see that's growing so much in that area that you like?
Yeah, there's some really big benefits to the Panhandle market versus anywhere else in Florida, especially if you research, back during the crash and the kind of the point of which the economy in Florida was disrupted. Jacksonville was hit pretty damn hard. It's, even though it does have, some military bases there, the Navy's there and all that good stuff. It still was affected in a dramatic way. So was the Tampa market. The Northwest Florida Panhandle, there's still a lot of high sales happening. A lot of people, lost their sheets here after the last 10 years, or just now catching up in the last year and a half from purchases they made back in the height of the market. But what's beautiful about this market is that there's not just one military base. I think we're about 5 total. And that spans from Pensacola between the Air Force and the Navy. It's you got the Navy and the Air Force and the Army down here in Fort Walton Beach, and little bits and pieces. You got the Tyndall over in Panama City. There's a lot of military presence here, and the types of bases that are here, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. Like they're very ingrained into what we do as a nation. So that helps us out tremendously. It also hurts us tremendously, but where it hurts us as a local community, it helps us in the real estate market. And that's because of what we call a land lock, So most of the land in Okaloosa County is owned by, the government. So because of that, there's very few areas that you can build. It's a very small land mass, starting to be a higher population. So that's increasing land values really drastically, especially places on the water, lots of land. And everyone knows that from a seller's perspective, they all know that that's a thing. So sales skills have to increase a little bit. But in general, because of that, unlike in the Pinellas market, which is a very hot market right now, another massive county in terms of population versus land size and everything else, comparatively to other counties in Florida, there's a lot of opportunity there because there's a lot of houses to meet that. Like there's a lot of communities that are like from the 50s and 70s and even earlier than that you could because of that, there's a equal bounce in flipping properties versus wholesaling. There's enough communities in our market. Those 1970 homes, like Elliott Point, for example, it's only maybe like maybe 2 square miles or something like that. It's not a lot of space. So there's not a lot of homes to actually have flips going on, and everybody's talking to the same person. So you got to get really unique with what you're doing. But one of the beautiful things about starting in a market like this, for others that might start in similar markets across Florida, is like, once you start in this market and you find out how to get deals in a market like we're in, you can get deals in any market. And while everybody else in like Pinellas County is marketing across all of Pinellas County, we're focusing very specifically on a certain type of person in Pinellas County. So I think they're very similar in terms of what Florida was traditionally built on initially. Mobile home areas converted into block homes, in the 70s, now converting from block homes to, what we see being built now on stick built, which I'd prefer keep the block homes if possible, but asbestos and all that stuff sometimes limits that. I got to tear it down. But yeah, I think that's kind of a summary of it.
You brought up a really good point about bringing a different type of sales tactic to that area. So I would say Jacksonville's probably, you have a lot more businesses here. You have a lot more people here. The growth here is a little different. And I think people are just more receptive to, especially investors or realtors that want to sell. But in the market you're in a lot smaller counties, especially when you start talking about Okaloosa, Washington County, very familiar with that county, Escambia, boy, I mean, you could list it off, but you're talking about smaller counties. And there's an investor here that goes after Gainesville. And he figured out a way to tackle the small markets, and it's hard. It's very difficult. What strategies, I know you got your secret sauce, but what strategies have you noticed, and how are the sellers different and more receptive or less receptive in those markets?
So as far as being receptive, I think that because this market it's not really because of the market, it's because of where real estate's at right now as an industry. We have a lot of the younger military here, right? Getting in, searching how to make more money on the side and stuff like that on YouTube. They're finding, YouTube influencers or Instagram influencers. So now you're seeing like an influx of, individuals posting out bandit signs, and there's new people coming in and out every single week. And I think that's what ultimately is like hurting our local market a little bit. It's a good opportunity as experienced investors because we can create meetups and bring these people in and foster them into, deal flow and things like that. But the negative side of it is that the local community starts getting a bad condensation or a bad stigma for, we buy houses type businesses. So in terms of like what I've noticed to be the best strategy to really approach in any market, to be honest with you, is always leading with how you can solve problems versus leading with how you can make money. And this is a common thing. It's pushed everywhere. And it's kind of like a faddish thing to say where, we got to be solution driven and all these types of things. But I truly do believe in it as a company core value, that community being one of our core values. Our ultimate goal, no matter what it is, we're all humans, and people that are in bad situations aren't looking to get screwed over. So it's like if you push out there in the right kind of way and you make yourself known as a solution driven real estate company rather than a real estate wholesaler, I think that you find yourself bringing in the right type of person who's looking for help and not coming at it from the approach of like, I don't know, like for example, I had an individual came from one of our Facebook ads, and he submitted on our Carrot site, and on our Carrot site we automatically send an email afterwards, right? So once I sent the email, the email is basically saying, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the property? And he responded back, and he's like, well, you could just take a look at what I just submitted to you. I spent all that, that time giving you all this valuable information. Read that first. And at the end of the email, he's like, I went back and I looked at what he submitted. And one of the things in the notes he said is like, I have a buyer who's interested. It's a brand new remodel, all this, that, and the other. And at the very end of it, he says, I just figured maybe I'll let you have the opportunity, essentially like saying as though like he was coming at me already because of the impression that we have as we buy houses companies, as if he's doing me a favor by bringing me this property. So when it comes to like communicating, putting yourself out there in the right way and the right testimonials in your websites, it can help. But sometimes you still get these individuals like this person who is automatically still he has this perception of dishonesty there. And that's why he's acting that kind of way. So I responded back, and I started off addressing that right in the very beginning. I said, hey, how's it going? I already know that this is going to be a property that works out for me for a few different reasons. And the very first reason is you're coming into this relationship between you and I already in the wrong way. You're telling me that you're going to give me the opportunity. You're creating an aggressive conversation through your emails and the way that you're communicating with me, and I haven't even spoke to you on the phone yet or done anything with you. And so then there was more emails to that. And I was just super honest. And I said, listen, not only that, you just remodeled it. You'd make more money if you listed it online. And it sounds like you might have a buyer already lined up. So this is what I can do for you. With that in mind, with what you've told me, I can either list your property, I can give you my contract so you can do for sale by owner. I can do this, that, and the other. And he responded back, starting off with, I am apologetic of acting the way that I did without knowing you yet, and that he appreciated my honesty is essentially what he's saying. He appreciates my honesty. You're right. It probably wouldn't fit your criteria, this, that, and the other. I don't know why I ultimately submitted to you to begin with, but I would really appreciate that for sale by owner contract. And so I sent it to him, and that was the end of that conversation. So I'm acceptance of the fact that I know that I'm not going to get every single deal. However, after I sent him the contract, he sent me a lead to his neighbor who has a distressed property, and I'm following up with him. So it's like, if it's all about the way that you approach it. And in this market, and in a market where you're having a lot of influx of we buy houses, You have to diversify yourself by being a company and not being a fly-by-night wholesaler type personality where you're just trying to ring in your bell the loudest to see what shit, who comes to the dinner table. Because sometimes people just don't leave their couch to, I don't know, come eat. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. You're right about that. And look what it did is that deal led to another thing. And it's like if you show what authenticity you're able to bring and say, "Hey, look, we're trying to help you. This is not, hey, we could throw you cash quick and close in less than 30 days." They don't want to
Yeah.
hear that anymore. And it's for some sellers it's tough. I've heard the stories. I don't do it myself, but I've heard the stories about just how some are hard to open up. So, with that being said, what would be like the most important tip to investors or to realtors to lock up your deals? Like, what would be that one lesson you learned about locking it up?
So for me, because we're not one of those types of companies that's like high volume, right? We're a low volume, high revenue. That's our goal. So in terms of locking it up, it all starts with the initial data you intake into your company. And then after you intake the right data into your company, right, and then you market to that in the right kind of way and you produce the right leads coming in, the lockups happen themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like we do follow up. Obviously, we still get people in there that aren't like the most hot leads, but like the stuff that we lock up in our revenue always comes from, you know, strictly like open lines of communication and there being something that needs to be solved. We just closed the deal last week no, like 2 weeks ago. I mean, it was 18 months of follow-up, and it's like, I mean, it was a $75,000 deal, but it's like 18 months, and it converted. And the reason why is in the very beginning of that conversation, we asked, okay, why are you reaching out to us? This is from direct mail. Why are you reaching out to us? What's going on? And we had a conversation with him. His wife was sick and he was sick. He was going through chemo. September of last year, he was when he decided he wanted to try to sell. We followed up with him. He said he wasn't ready yet. Things were still a little rough. So we just continue to follow up with him, one call or two calls every month, and kept up that open line of communication. And finally, like a month ago, called him back again, got it under contract. And then, within a few days it was gone and then closing happened. And it's just like, so as far as like my number one, I guess, tip for anybody to actually get the close, I think where most people struggle is number one, they don't know how to properly run their numbers. It's probably number one thing. But number two, they're afraid to actually say what it is that needs to be said. Like, for example, if I don't know how to handle an objection, I default to honesty, right? And I think the reason why people get so tripped up on handling sales calls is because they're trying to think of the thing not to say to not get in trouble,
Right.
right? So they're trying to lie. It's like, listen, like if I don't know something, I just say that I don't know it. Maybe I got that from my dad as a kid or something. I don't know. But like if I don't understand or I don't know it, I just default to honesty. Is like, listen, I don't 100% know. That's the first situation for me. However, what I do know is like, this is what I can execute on. This is what I do know. I can figure that out. But what I'm concerned about is this, that, and the other. It might not be a concern of yours, but it's a concern of mine. Be it that they're behind on taxes, right? Let's just say they're behind on taxes and they're going to go to tax auction in a month from now. They're like, okay, well, I don't go to tax auction for a month from now. Okay, I understand that. However, title work, this is what I know as someone who buys property a bunch, is title work can take this long. This can take that long. And if we wait until 3 weeks from now to decide to sell, it's going to be too late. And to be honest with you, at that point, I would just bid at tax auction. I want to get you some money here. I would like to work with you because one of our core values is community. So let's work together to come up with something that's going to be mutually beneficial so that we don't get to this point where there's a situation where you're not going to get anything. So that would be like an example of something like that. So it's like, what do I know? What do they need? And how can we come to a mutual, agreement on that? And if you do that as an agent or an investor, um, you might not get every single deal because there's going to be somebody else who's more of the shark mentality that's going to push someone into a deal. But I can guarantee you that you're going to have a lot more testimonials.
For sure. If
Yeah.
you do the right thing, or you are just um, authentic and you're following up and you're consistent and all those good characteristics, you're going to get the deal. And those are great tips. Anybody that's watching, when this gets put out, Tyler sees this stuff on a daily basis. He's been investing for a while, so those are great tips, Tyler. And some of the things that I know you wanted to talk about is, and you kind of mentioned data, so that kind of triggered my mind about how you don't need new data all the time, and you can understand properly market to data. So you need to have just proper data management. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest issues, I mean, we're fortunate in Florida that we have a, it's improving. I shall say, the like a good public records system, right? Some counties are still really jacked, but most of Florida's moving over to like, was it Q Public or whatever it's called, and that's very clean. Has a lot of benefits to it. Has some flaws, but there's benefits to that. Okay, so I'm going to preface with the fact that county data is still really important. Um, but where the biggest thing that I think newer investors, even super seasoned investors, make mistakes on is they get into this trap of buying like high equity data every single month or every 3 months, because what they're doing is their mindset as a company is that I need to spend this much money to make this much money, which is smart, right? That's a standard KPI,
Right.
makes sense. But I challenge most people to say, how can I spend, instead of this much money, spend this much money and make even more money? Because that's the ultimate goal of a CEO, right? Your only really job is to, increase revenue, decrease costs, which is a direct reflection of increasing revenue, or increase ROI, and to expand, right? So I think what a lot of people do is number one, as solo people, they don't look at themselves as CEOs, right? So they don't even think about it. I think it's a thought that they're going to have in the future after they get their first deal or whatever, or multiple deals. And stabilized companies, they're already in their rhythm of things, and they're not recognizing the fact that, no different than saving on taxes, not spent money is increased revenue. So if you don't spend money, you're making more. And if you do that every single month, you can not spend $5,000 every single month, and you'd be $60,000 richer. From that, with that idea in your mind, what people need to do is they need to understand what data actually is. What is high equity data even? And all high equity data is this is an owner, and this is their mailing address, this is their property address, no different than county records. Okay. And this is the estimated equity, which is no different than county records saying that it was sold in, 1991 for this price. Do the math and you can figure out how much equity is. How many, most mortgages are how many years? 30 years, right? So if I just say, well, as long as I know that it was purchased more than 30 years ago, I can assume free and clear. And that's what most of these websites do. There's a little bit more algorithm behind it, but that's the preface, right? Like, what it was the average mortgage then, how much do they buy it for? How many years has it been? Math, equity. So what they do is they buy this data and then they throw it away after a certain period of time. But yet it's like those 10,000 people didn't move. They're still living in that home. Why would you throw it away? That's a data set. That's information. We can use that long term. All right. And then we start taking these other things into consideration where, now if we know that that's a thing that we can have forever, that data doesn't expire, and data, the only time it does expire is when it's sold. And even then, when a property sells, it just means in 5 years from now, there's enough equity for it to become a prospect again. So it's like you can recycle this data, on the high equity side. But now what we need to do is we need to bring in, and a common industry term is the whole stacking thing. I think that's a joke. It's not so much about stacking. It's about data management. It's about taking your data and it's about saving and increasing revenue. So by merging this data in, right, and having a centralized data management, what we're able to do is we're able to take, like, let's just say our probates that we're getting, put that with that high equity. Okay. And now we can see, okay, they're probate and they're high equity, which is great. That's good information to have. That means if we were to send postcards, we would save 49 cents or whatever we're paying per postcard, because now it's just one record, not two. So that's good. Okay. But we need to take it even deeper than that. Let's just say we have 100 people that are on probate and high equity. And let's just say that there's 300 that are only on probate. They didn't stack with anything. Okay. I call those ouchies. That means that they're not stacked with anything. They're just on that one bucket or segmentation of data. I try to keep this as simple as possible for people that are listening and not seeing a visual drawing of something. But those probates, right? What most people will do, okay, is they will market to those. They'll skip trace the owner, or skip trace the PR, or hopefully maybe the county gave them that phone number and they won't reach them. And then they say, I'm done. All right. Well, okay, the person still passed. If you didn't get a yes or a no, if they want to sell or what that family wants to do with that property, then you're not doing your job as a marketer. See, and what most people do is they'll call through it. And that's why I talk about, like, they're willing to spend money just to make money, and they're just going to move on to the next thing. They'll have those 300 people that aren't stacked with high equity, and they won't do anything with those, or they'll call through it, skip trace it once, and then call through it, and then that's it, and then they throw it all away. But what we do is we say, well, let's look at those. If they're only on that one probate list, let's look to see, are any of those properties vacant, or any of those PRs out of state owners. We try to look to see, well, where is the actual problem here that could be solved, not let me call through and see if I can make money real quick. So you got to dig a little bit deeper into it. And it goes really pretty elaborate, but it all boils down to, don't spend more money over and over and over on high equity. Once you have it once, you don't need it again, right? Make sure you're intaking data into your company, especially on high equity, that revolves around the right locations and what buyers want and all that kind of stuff, the right median price ranges. And now let's take this vexation data, tax delinquency, probates, or whatever, and let's intake that. And then after we do that, we have that all centralized in one location. We need to segment it out, right? We have high equity, we have stacked data, we have vacancy data, and then we have ouchies. All right. And what that means is that there's 4 buckets that you have that no matter what, if you market to them and you filter by that data right, then you're never going to step on your own toes and repeat marketing costs. And as you market through those different buckets, right, this is what actual marketers do with their emails, for example, and stuff like that, is segment it out. They understand it. This is how Walmart knows how many people come into a store versus how many people purchase something, right? These are things that Walmart cared about, but Sears didn't. And now Sears doesn't exist, right? So if you want to make it through a market that's evolving, that you have no control over, what you do have control over is how much money you spend and how. So if you focus on that as a marketer, you can actually, like, gain as much money into your company as possible. So after you market and you start marketing, this is the next biggest mistake, and I'll kind of leave it at that because there's a lot of information, right?
Is anybody noticing Tyler's on a roll? This is so valuable. So keep going, because I know we haven't really gone into other stuff, but people need to hear this, right? Like, you're really getting deep with how, like, this applies to, like, companies that have been successful or failed, and how that, like, applies to being a successful investor.
Right. 100%. It's like, people want to think of themselves. People want to have the money now. What I tell myself is, like, I'm going to be in business 20 years from now. And that's the difference between me and a lot of these other investors out there, is like, at least most of these, especially newer investors, is like, when I came into this, like, I came into this saying, like, this is going to be the thing that changes that I do for the rest of my life. So why would I not care about it? Because some of the things I hear all the time is like, well, I don't really have the time to spend on that. I'm like, okay, what are you spending your time on? Because if you don't have your time to spend on this, but you're not producing any revenue, is it that you're actually doing? You're just throwing to see what sticks. Okay. So anyway, after you skip trace, right? I'm going to give a scenario, right? I skip trace one homeowner. We're just going to say one person. I have one record that I'm trying to find. Let's just say that it was somebody who was probate, right? Just for the sake of who you are, right? Yeah. We'll say they're a probate individual. it's a probate individual. And I'm like, listen, I really want that house. You know, like it's in a perfect location. I drove past it. I seen it was messed up or whatever. Like, I know that's the one I want. I want it for myself. Let's just say. Okay. And I skip trace that individual. I'm going to get, let's say 5 phone numbers. And I'm going to call each phone number manually. And I'm going to call the first one and it, you know, beep, 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 whatever, it's dead number. Call the second one. If someone picks up and it's like Joe Schmo down the street, he's like, I have no idea how you got my phone number. Maybe it's because they received mail at some point, skip trace and company messed up, whatever, wrong phone number. Okay. Third phone number, beep, beep, dead number. Fourth phone number, some dude in Pennsylvania doesn't even know who the hell I am, right? Wrong phone number.
Right.
Fifth phone number, I call it and dead again, right? So I have 5 phone numbers, none of which are now the owner. Companies that do this type of marketing where you blast, 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 they never know that those 5 phone numbers are now exhausted, right? What they know is that they didn't, in fact, they don't even know that they didn't reach the person, right? But if we take it back to a micro and we say, okay, well, let's just look at one record on how we would reach one person to the highest of our ability. And then we do that well, and we understand that well. And then we duplicate that process now with 100,000 people. Okay. How do we do that? And that's what we focus on. So after we exhaust those 5 phone numbers and we know that it's exhausted, and I didn't reach that person, but I really want this property, right? I want to live there. It's on the water. It's beautiful. Can't get no land, you know, on the water here anymore. I want this house. I go to the public records because now now I know it's probate because I looked at it. I'm like, oh, it's probate. All right. So now I'm looking in county records and I'm checking to see what's going on with it. And I see, okay, a personal representative has been assigned. Let me call the personal representative. Can't reach them. Doesn't have a phone number. For whatever case, this one didn't show it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. All right, so now I'm stuck. So now the questions that we have to ask ourselves is like, how do we reach this person then? You know, and that's what the go, no go process is. We call it deep prospecting, right? This is what, you know, someone like an attorney or a private investigator would start doing. And the reason I learned how to do this is because I worked for the government, right? So I just took tactics I used for the government, right? As a cybersecurity engineer, and a penetration tester or hacker, for lack of other terms, right? I took those tactics that I learned in open source intelligence and I bring it into real estate. And I said, listen, I need to figure out how to get a hold of this person. Let me start digging and unraveling all the threads. And then finally, I get a hold of the second cousin, right? And the second cousin heard about his aunt that lives in Florida that is there, that ended up being the sister of the person that passed away, right? As a scenario, right? Yeah. So if you take it from that approach now, so how do we do that with 100,000 records though? How do we scale that? Because see, scale to most people is let me hire more cold callers, buy more data and spend more money. Scale to me is more revenue, not more expenditure, right? So all we have to do then is we intake the data and we properly manage it. And as we're cold calling and as we're marketing, we update that data simultaneously so that we can find out who's the 10, 15, 20 people a week that have exhausted phone numbers. So we can pluck those out, put those in a new methodology, right? Such as the go, no go process, or maybe you start sending them direct mail or whatever the scenario is, so that we can now not say, well, let me go buy more data because that's the answer. When I have 130,000 people inside, well, in my case, I got 375,000 records, right? If I can't build a 7-figure operation or at least a 6-figure operation off 375,000 individuals, we got bigger problems at our hands, especially when we know that there's agents out there not spending any dollars and literally making hundreds of thousands, if not millions, off of sphere of influence, right?
Right.
So how do you combine sphere of influence and credibility as an investor, as someone who's a solution solver, and combine that with this outbound prospecting for the people who don't know you, right? And create this ecosystem, what I call the Viking boat of marketing, where, you know, you're sailing the seas, you're not sure what storms are coming, but no matter what comes, we know that we're built strong to be able to make it through it, right? Having the right direct mail strategy, having a little bit of cold calling there, having some SMS in there, but all in the end, all we're doing, the number one thing, and I'll end at this on this topic is we're trying to figure out who we're not reaching, not who we are reaching. Who we are reaching is very simple. Like we're talking right now. I know that I'm reaching you, right? Because you can
Right.
hear me. However, if there's someone that's in another room in your household right now, they might not be receiving this message because I don't know they exist. Right.
Right.
So the same concept exists true in your marketing in general. How you find out who you're not reaching versus who you are. And once you start figuring that out and how to do that, you just replicate. And that's how you make, a lot of money with spending very little money in any
Yeah, you
marketing.
you talked about so many different things that were going on in my brain that I was like, we got to talk about this. We got to talk
Yeah.
about this. Um, you know, just ending on that point that you said, it's very different. It's a very different strategy you have, like because you know that talking to that one person that's receptive, that's an easy lead. But getting the ones that are hard almost drives you a little bit, right? Like you all want to figure out how to get that. And
Mhm.
there are different types of investors in real estate. They're the ones that do the high volume. And if they're not getting calls, they move on to the next one. If they've tried 10 phone numbers, they're on to the next thing. It's high volume. You are definitely in that bucket of investors that you like the challenge of not getting that person and you want to take that step into figuring, like it's a mystery to you. It like really pings you to find out where it is. We'll see investors that have that similar strategy. There's an investor, the one I talked about in Gainesville, Brett McCullum. Brett is the type that he may not be high volume, but when he gets a weird title issue one, or maybe somebody gets something title issue that's going to back it up for months and 7, 8 months, he's not afraid to say, hey, we'll give you finder's fee, hand that over, and we'll take it on. Almost like another challenge, right? Same thing with you with finding these leads. It's fascinating because you're almost willing to wait and take the long game on this stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's like when I talk about like the Viking ship of it, like we're still doing that other stuff, but it's like we're focusing our marketing dollars on where it matters so that we can get the highest return as possible. Like we do Facebook ads, right? And we're hitting everybody, right? We have that KPI, we know that. That's part of the branding side and stuff like that. I just think that like a lot of those guys who like are trying to pull down 15, 20 deals, 40 deals a month, right? They're spending a lot of money, and they could be making the same amount of money, and or at least at minimum adding on a huge leg of revenue if they just added another section of their company that says, well, let me actually track this data properly. And that way, as I'm spending my money doing this bulk massive marketing tactic, because you're still going to get results from that, but let me take the stuff that's falling down here, right? And let me pull it over here and do something more with it. And for companies that are doing high volume, it's a no-brainer kind of move because you're literally just expanding your company, and like it is a natural progression of a company once it reaches a certain state. Because um, it's no different than any company that's trying to go from like six figures to seven figures, or seven figures beyond that. Because I mean, let's be honest, like wholesaling in general is a seven-figure industry. It's not like if you combine everybody together, it could be multiple seven figures, right? But it's like it's really not an eight-figure typically industry. If you want to get into eight figures, now you got to start delving into
Luxury.
multifamily bigger stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what most investors I feel have to think about is like, we're really kind of particular, and it's just because of my investor model, right? Like real estate for me is like I got to get my salary, I got to get my four rentals a year, I got to bring on a certain amount of flips. Like I just have this model of what I want my company to do. I could care less if my company ever breaks above 1.5 million, for example. Like it's not a model for me. Like I'm okay if it drops down and it stays at 700 to 900. Like I'm cool with that, because I know I'm only spending, with everything, as far as expenditures, anywhere between 100 and 125,000 a year, moving into 2021. And if that's what I'm doing and I'm making those, I'm making really good margins, and I'm focusing on building my next stream of income, because I can't, if you build one of these massive companies, it's just so difficult um, to keep your sanity. Honestly, it's like you can automate it and you can let it go, and then most guys move on to the next thing, but they can be affected really, really easily by changes in legislation and things like that if they're not careful. in building the right solid foundation. It's so easy to spend a crap ton of money and make money in real estate. The more you spend, and as long as you're following up with everything, you're gonna make more money, right? But you just get stuck in that trap of spending to make, to spending to make, and that sooner or later you find yourself only making 20% profit margins, or maybe less than that, and you drop down to 15% profit margins. You're like, why the hell do I even have this whole team and this whole crew and all this stuff when I could be doing this with like 5 people and making 60% profit margins? And more would be going in my back pocket now as the owner of the company, because I could distribute all of it. So I
Right.
don't know. Yeah.
No, those are great tips. I mean, that's great. And just keeping track of those things is very important. Um, so you brought up also great points about marketing, SMS texting or cold calling or mail marketing. What have you noticed has been the most effective? And maybe it depends on the bucket that you've placed the lead in, right? It depends. Maybe the easy ones are the cold call, the harder ones are the mailers. The texting is the ones where you can't get anybody, but all of a sudden they like texting because they don't want to talk to people.
Yep.
What have you noticed that's working in your markets that you can share with others that are great tips?
Yes, that's a good question, because it's a huge question across the industry, right? And so it all revolves back to that statement I made earlier, right? Who am I reaching, or who am I not reaching versus who I am, right? Understand that SMS is no different than cold calling. The difference is um, the person on the other side to be able to respond to that, right? And that's all marketing is. It's psychology, right? It's like, it's understanding and figuring out, how can I trigger this person to respond back to me. Everybody has a different metric, that they have. I know for fact, if you call my phone, I'm in too many meetings, I got too much going on, and by the end of the day, I'm not calling back any phone numbers. We had a vehicle that's totaled, and like I haven't even called back the person to deal with that, because they called me and left a voicemail. If they texted me, I would have responded probably by now. Right. But it's like, it's hard for me to gain the time to make that thing. And a lot of other people are the same way. They have lives. Right. So the best way for me to answer this is, again, with a strategy rather than my opinion. Right. So what people, I guess it's kind of both strategy and opinion. If you have phone numbers, your ultimate goal is to figure out, is a phone number to the owner of the person, or is it not? That's what we're doing. That's why we skip trace, right? We're trying to figure out, do you own this property? Is this a good number to contact you at?
Right.
That's why when you call somebody and say, is this a good number to call you back at? We're trying to verify. That's our goal, right? What SMS is really cool about is it's an easy way to get that answer fast, right? So once you have your data and you've skip traced it, you have to know a few different things. Number one, to save you a bunch of money, and number two, from a marketing tactic. Number one, you got to know what is mobile numbers versus what is not mobile numbers, and that's an easy thing, like to know, right? It's very easy information to gain from most skip tracing providers. And if your skip trace provider doesn't have it, it's a requirement in the data packet that you send to a phone number for it to respond back what it is. Okay. So you upload that to a software, whatever, you get that information. Now we take and we say, okay, all my mobile phone numbers, I'm going to send to SMS, because now what I could do is I can send through those, not more than I can handle, because it's more important to update the data with the responses of this than it is to send more. Okay. Once you figure out what your metric is and what your KPI is, now you can send more all you want, as long as you can handle it. So you get that standard baseline, you get the responses, and you update your data accordingly. Now, but they might not be the type of person that knows how to do SMS, right? So those mobile phone numbers are special because they can receive SMSs, but they can also receive cold calling. Landlines, they can't receive SMSs, but they can receive cold calling. So for a certain bucket of individuals, like you hinted towards earlier, you might market to them differently. Yes. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, let me SMS through these real quick. Let me update my data so I know which phone numbers are good or bad. Now I'm going to take all those phone numbers and I'm also going to cold call them, because now I'm not going to waste time or spend any money on the wrong phone numbers, because I've already removed those from the mobiles, at least for the people that responded that I know aren't the owner. Then I'm going to cold call through those, and I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to update my data again. So we do that through iterations, and we come to find out that there's, out of a certain amount of iterations, there's a certain amount of people I'm not contacting. And I know that because I can look and see what numbers are, what records have numbers that are wrong phone numbers or not the right person or haven't been reached yet. Okay. So now that's SMS and cold calling. Now there's a certain amount of those people. Let's just say people that are probate and vacant properties, right? Those individuals, if we are sending them SMS and we're sending them cold calling, their avatar, the way that they respond might be through, they might always check their mail. So for us, what we say is like, listen, there's a certain group of people that they're always going to get direct mail from us because we're not willing to accept the fact that I'm going to try to cold call them and hopefully reach them when I don't know. And I always say, as a business owner, you don't know what you don't know, and making business decisions off what you don't know makes you a fool, right?
Right.
So if I don't know if that person will respond to direct mail, and I understand there's budget into it and there's people wherever they're at, and you just kind of grow into this, right? But I'm going to send direct mail to all of these individuals because what I'm banking on is that they're going to see that postcard and call me before I get hold of them. Right. And if they don't, and if I end up exhausting that record, I'm just going to continue to leave them on the direct mail until that happens. There's no other option. I'm not going to not do it because it's just a matter of time. And then you build your KPI and you just do that. And then Facebook is the same kind of way, right? You do that nurture, you're sending it out there. And I don't know what I don't know. I don't know if mobile, social media is what is going to make them convert because they're going to see my face, they're going to hear my genuality, they're going to know who I am. So I'm going to not do it to this segment of people, right? Because I don't want to accept the fact that, again, if I add them on Facebook and they go to their phone and they're going to see me on their second swipe down, right? And maybe they'll convert. And that's what I'm aiming for. So for some of this data, you want to market everything to them because you want to figure out what you just want to get in front of them with whatever way they're going to convert. You don't know that. This is why, and this is kind of funny because like people who only cold call, then they wonder why in the same market, there can be someone RVMing and they can be doing just as good as a person cold calling. And that's because if you watch the data on cold calling, for every 1,500 phone numbers, about 750 that go to voicemail, right? And if that same marketer is not doing any sort of leaving voicemails or RVMing, this other person who does do RVMing and no cold calling is still hitting the same amount of people as a person that's cold calling because they're hitting the voicemails and the other person's not. The difference between us is like we'd rather central down into what I call the 96-4-1 principle. 96% of people will never sell to you, period. 4% are in a position where they need to sell, but only 1% of the 4% are going to sell to you right now. I try to find the 1% of the 4% while still marketing to the full 4% and then doing really cheap marketing to the 96% for branding. And for the people that I get the voicemails for, I just know that answer, which is a very easy thing to do. It's just most companies don't put the time and effort into actually just implementing as a process in their company. So yeah.
Yeah, you got to leave a voicemail. I mean, I mean, that's common sense. If you're calling somebody and saying, "Hey, I'd like to buy your house," you got to at least tell them that you're interested. Or have you noticed that it's better? I don't know what companies are doing. Are they doing like the robot method? Or are they actually making it personalized? Because I would respond to somebody if it was like, "Hey, this is Tyler, Al. I came across your property. Look, I'd love to help. Find a way to get some cash in your hand, whatever it is, but more authentic that way." And I don't know if people are doing that.
Yeah. So a lot of companies at RVM, especially, they're not. It's like a very it's a personalized message. They try to make it sound good, but really what they're caring about is they're caring about the person who listens to the whole voicemail and calls the number inside of the voicemail, not the number that was on the dial, the missed calls. Because you leave two different phone numbers, right? And that's gauging motivation. That works, right? I have a buddy does very well in Dallas using that tactic, right? The difference is that you should be doing it as long as you're doing that method, but you're segmenting out, like that tactic I just mentioned just now, that form of RVMing should only be happening to your equity bucket. Those are people who are only on the equity list. They're not vacant. They're not on multiple lists. They're not nothing. They're just people who you just like, again, you don't know what you don't know. You don't want to miss opportunity. It's a very cheap marketing tactic. So cool. Like blurp it out there, whatever. But the people who are on multiple lists, give it that personal attention. If you're going to do cold calling, put it on a single or a dial and a half on the dialer. And once it hits if it gets a voicemail, leave a manual voicemail, right? Have your callers do that, because I mean, I've made 52 grand from that same thing, right? What's an extra 52 grand for an extra 5 seconds? It's not, right? And I know it adds up as far as seconds are concerned, but there's a number of scale there. If you spend 30, 60 seconds, maybe it's going to generate you an extra, $100,000 in responses. So I think that, again, it boils back to making sure that you're marketing to people in such a way that tailors to who they are, not making assumptions and basing it strictly off the data, right? And separate that data out so you're not repeating itself, and give the nurture and love to the prospects which need it. Because let's be honest here, a lot of, depending on the type of data you're marketing to, a lot of those individuals got in situations because they're not very good at communicating, right? So if you understand that, then what you got to understand is you have to be able to figure out how do they communicate. And at a certain point in the go no go process, it's like, cool, if you're doing good closing like tax delinquencies and vacants, cool. I'm going to take all my tax delinquencies and vacants. I'm going to skip trace them in 2 different locations. Anything I don't get phone numbers back from, I'm going to start digging into really heavily. And the last resort on that is like knocking on everybody's door, and figuring it out. So, I mean, we have a user who literally got a hold of somebody because they sent a pizza to a house in Australia. Like, just thinking outside the box, like so anybody, you're going to answer the door for a pizza man. Like that's going to happen,
Yeah.
And curiosity, like how can you intrigue curiosity in people to get the conversion, to get on the phone with them, not without doing things illegal, because you got to be careful with some of the things you do. Right. For example, one of the tactics we use is like dating profiles, right? You got to be very careful because it's illegal to trick someone into something. You can get in really big trouble that way. So use something as a methodology to get an accurate phone number, an accurate way to contact them, and then use your traditional means to then execute on that, so that you don't find yourself, being, put in prison.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know. I just know what I'm not willing to risk, based off of my past experiences.
Yeah, there's so many marketing laws out there, and being careful about what you do. Yeah, so anybody out there watching, you got to make sure you know what you're doing with the marketing laws. But direct mailing gets so expensive, Tyler. Direct mail gets expensive. There's so many strategies on this. I even heard this one investor one time. He said he wouldn't go door knocking, but if he saw a property he liked, he would go to it. He'd check it out. If he was interested, he'd write a sticky, and on the sticky, post it on the door and said, "Hey, my name is Evan. I'm really interested in this. Call me." And it wasn't a long-winded, big piece of paper with a picture on it, because some people think, oh, that works, and maybe it does, right? Putting face to paper, whatever. But the whole idea of trying to be different, like all these strategies you're talking about, is being different, is so big. I mean, people just don't realize that. And it makes a difference. I've seen that. Like I rarely get letters from investors, right? As an attorney, with open probates. And some of these programs are like, oh yeah, you got to mail the lawyer, you got to mail this. I rarely get letters. And I'm not saying that's effective, because it's not me making the decision, it's the client. But you would think I would get more mailers. Right. And sometimes this goes to the consistency, somebody getting the data, they don't really use it, they just let it go. Oh, I tried, I didn't get anybody. Anybody watching really needs to take a lesson. This is a masterclass from Tyler about really diving deep into that area and not giving up and following up. And he's basically saying, look, if you got the data, you just really got to find the data and dive deep in it, and it's going to be there. It's just a matter of really getting in tune with the people that are behind it. It's not that it's a dead lead. I mean, otherwise all these leads that'd be out there would be dead leads and not going to work. You just got to really be consistent. But that's the difference with someone like you, Tyler. So this is the difference with people that are in the Jacksonville market. You got the heavy investors that are really going to make it happen. And the ones that maybe just start and realize that this is not something for me right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful because, like, as long as you're focusing and you can intake data into your company, you understand how to properly, like, start off and manage it the right way, right? If you get that solid foundation as a new investor, because we have like new investors who never done a deal in their life, never had data, never done any of that, right? And within 30 days, closing deals. Why is that? It's just because of the simple concept. Who am I reaching versus who am I not? If I do that one thing with 100 properties and I focus on those 100 properties, 10 of those 100, right? If I do 10 a year, right? That's 6 figures, right? That's all I need. I don't need all of them. I just need to understand who I am reaching versus who I'm not. And that's why people like McLean with his case study in the Go No Go is so successful. 47 dials. That started with 550 prospects down to 27, 47 dials, 15 contacts, 7 offers, right? And 165 grand, 7 offers and 7 accepted, right? And some of those people were like siblings, right? It wasn't the owners. It was in probates. It was in these situations. It's like, you can do it from the very beginning as a brand new investor. But if you're a seasoned investor, right, and you're closing deals right now, and you're skip tracing every single month, thousands of records, there is a problem in your company, period. The only new data you should be skip tracing is the stuff that entered in new, right? And there's the whole thing we didn't even touch on when it comes to incomplete data and data no one's even touching, right? But, the new probates, you're going to bring this new data in, make sure it's nice, filter by it, skip trace the new stuff, anything that doesn't get results, do something with that. You just add this process in there. Businesses, the only reason why a wholesaling company, number one, would be sold, right, is because there's processes behind it. It can make as much money as it wants, but if it's being held on by threads, it's useless. That's why I think a lot of wholesalers, if they're just a wholesaling company and they need to look like focus on process really heavily, or maybe take that revenue and put it into other businesses that can be sold, because one of the main reasons to even build a company. But like, yeah, it can be done on either front. You can save thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every single month if you just continue marketing how you are now, producing deals, but add in this really small piece. We manage and we pay hundreds of dollars a month for a CRM to manage our leads, the people who said yes, but the people and the data that we're using to get the yeses, for some reason, we don't care about. Doesn't make any sense logically, right? The data
Right.
that we're using to call to get the yeses, we don't keep up with in the same equivalency as once we get a yes. And that's a huge problem. It's just because it's not educated in the industry. And that's really what it is.
Yeah, because once you get an easy one, it's like, oh, well, I'm on to the next thing. You're
Yeah.
not worried about that one. And there goes the data on that. Let's talk about that though. Let's not lose track of this. You're on a roll. Let's talk about incomplete data. Like what happens? Like what's that about? I'm not really in that realm like you are. So
Yeah.
what do you do with stuff like that?
So incomplete data is equivalent to, see, this is really interesting because you buy data from these places, right? Whether it be, list source, prop stream, REI, something, I don't know. There's tons of them out there. You can get high equity data from anywhere. You can get it straight from your county. A lot of people spend thousands and thousands of dollars on high equity data, but they literally just go to their county and just download it.
Right.
They just don't know, right? And it's a matter of just again, what you don't know is what you don't know. But at the same time, there's convenience in buying it directly from a provider because they've already done some of the heavy lifting, making it organized, all those types of things. But even still, the data that any data provider gets comes from somebody manually inputting it with their fingers on a computer, right, into a database somewhere. And anytime there's a human involved, there is something called human error, right? There is something that we don't know. That could be missing a zip code. It could be missing the first name. The first name could just be a T instead of Tyler, right? And the reason why that happens in most cases, by the way, for anyone who wants to know, it's like I could have 6 or 7 people on the deed, and it just, the county records just abbreviates it: Austin, comma, T, comma, S, comma, P, comma, right? But if I look
Right.
at the deed, I can see all the first names. in my company, and what we do is we say, okay, I want to see all the records that have incomplete data. And I have thousands of those out of data that I've bought. I just bought all new high equity data in Pinellas County, and some around 130,000 high equity records. Okay. And out of those, 5,000 of them, which doesn't seem, it's a good percentage either way, but 5,000 of them were incomplete, meaning they were missing a full name, or they were missing a first name in general, missing zip codes, missing this information. I paid for it. But what most people that don't do data management do is they just take that then, even if it has trust or companies mixed in, and most people just say, oh, I don't feel like dealing with this. They just don't include trust or companies in their data, which is a huge mistake. But either way, they take that and they skip trace it right away. And they get results in skip tracing. And they might get results for the one that's T Austin, first name T, but the chances that it's accurate aren't very high because it doesn't have all of the information needed to do the proper checks and balances.
Right.
So again, I'm about trying to save as much money as humanly possible. So I'm like, let me just remove out all that incomplete stuff from the very beginning. I'm only going to skip trace the clean stuff. And I'm going to put I'm going to put an order of precedence on the incomplete data. I'm going to clean up the incomplete vacant data first, right? Then I'm going to clean up the incomplete stacked data. And then I'm going to clean up the incomplete probate records, right? And then I'm going to clean up at the very last of the list is the incomplete high equity data, because high equity is not a reason for selling. It's better than like 90% of America, if not more, that you have equity in your home. So every single month out of that incomplete data, because we're intaking new vexation data every single month, we're cleaning 200, 300, 400, 1,000 incomplete records and then moving them over into clean data. And then now I'm adding 1,000 new prospects that fit my criteria, that are motivated, that are vacant, that are this, that, and the other, that are getting brand new very first touches. And I spent $0 doing it, besides my admin VA that I spend $750 a month for anyway to do everything, right? Administrative related, to clean. So I didn't go out and buy 1,000 new records that now I have to skip trace all over again, or this, whatever, right? I just utilize what I already spent money on, which is smart. It's like no different than a refinery melting down, the recyclables to put it back into their system. If you can reduce, 0.001% of waste over the year, the margins overall increase by X percentage. It's a simple business 101 kind of tactic that you learn, I guess maybe in bit. I didn't go to business school, but I would assume it's probably a thing. I don't know.
Neither did I.
Yeah,
I
it's
only did the
wasted.
business law classes, so that doesn't really count.
Yes. Yeah, actually I did do like 3 law classes that were business. That's funny.
I didn't really learn anything from them until I even graduated from law school, and then I'm in the real world. Now you learn, right?
Right.
Even real estate, you don't really learn from the course you took. You learn from what you're doing.
100%. It's just kind of like, I feel like people just don't want to truly build businesses. That's the problem. They want to make money, which is cool. But if you build a real business that you got 2 most important assets in your company, your data and your people. Like without those 2 things, you don't have a business. So it's like, you got to focus on it. It's very important. Now there's operations I understand. They're like, you know what? I'm just going to spend my $50,000 a month in direct mail. I'm like, that's cool. You continue to do that. I think that's great. But at the same time, I just wish that you knew that you could be saving $6,000 a month right now, because, once something happens in the market, it's not a matter of like doing it because it's smart at that point. It's a matter of doing it because it's like the right, I don't know, for the survival of your company long term. I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny you were talking about the incomplete data and how there's human error. There was a probate thing that I went through recently where we looked it up on the property appraiser, and it like abbreviated the name, and I was like, what? And then I actually checked the deed, and the deed's got the full blown name. And
Yep.
it's things like that that the property appraiser doesn't do all the time, but it's little things like that that create that data. Or what they'll do is the address will be messed up, like you said. It won't be the right
Mhm.
address, and it'll be something else. Or the boxes, maybe on the Excel spreadsheet or whatever spreadsheet they're using, were shifted up. So the block at the bottom is all messed up with different things. Or the PO box, or it says unassigned location,
Yep.
or unknown location. Those are great for you. You
Yep.
know, you're like, unassigned. Let me find out where it is.
Yeah. That's easy.
So
Easy kill. No one else is reaching that person.
yeah, nobody else. I mean, there's so many of those that you'll find like in the middle of Florida where there's like land, and they don't even have like barely a parcel ID.
Yep.
And you have to like check the parcel ID, and then you're like, oh, now there's a sales history, but then you can't pull the deed. It's a mess. So definitely know what you're talking about when it comes to that now. You really cleared that up. So again, Tyler, this is all valuable information for people out there that are just starting out. Maybe they've been in the game for a couple years. There's some that are still doing mentorships and stuff, and that will watch this. We kind of backstage were talking about this. Biggest deal killers for you. It could be anything in your spectrum, and if it's probate, it's probate. If it's not, we'll definitely dive into some probate. But in your world of what you've dealt with, what has been the biggest deal killer?
Um, Man, it's an issue. It's when we talked about that, I was thinking pretty strongly on it because we do a lot of different stuff now. Probates. I mean, we've had someone die in the middle of a deal and had to file. We looked into the laws and found out we can actually file probate on behalf because we had a contract before they passed. Like, so we haven't had any probates kill us yet. What has killed us though is really just relationship disputes if there's multiple people on a deed. That's probably our number one. If we're going to have a deal killer, it'll be the fact that in like probate type situations, trying to get the right person that we want authority over the property to have, them to have that so that we can make something happen. If we can't, then generally what we'll do is we'll buy out the others and then do basically a foreclosure tactic, right?
Partition, yeah, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
So that's kind of like we figured out through, again, like you were saying earlier, you don't learn it in college, you learn it in real life, right? And as we've kind of delved in and experienced a lot of these different problems, most of the issues that we have a solution to, which is nice when you're doing sales, type conversations. The problem is like in those situations where you're going to buy part of a deed, right? You start holding up money in it. Now you got time that it takes to get that money into your business. No different than really flipping. But after you get the property and it's officially all yours, now you got to figure out, okay, well now I got to flip it or sell it or whatever. But in general, my biggest deal killer is probably going to be somebody else whispering in this person's ear, which really boils down to, rapport or something else, or you're just somebody who's really hard to convince, or like after you put them under a contract, they start, just feeling emotionally attached in these types of problems. These are problems that like everybody is going to have in general, and everyone has them. It's just a matter of just getting good at being a good conversationer, I guess, and having the right things in place for credibility, building, making sure people have confidence that you can achieve what you want. But some of the things
Many
that
of the
we
same things we kind of talked about before.
yeah, a lot of the stuff that we already talked about. It's just a matter of kind of being the best that you can be. But that's probably um that's probably our number one deal killer. We don't have very many deals that we don't end up closing. The ones that we don't end up closing are generally ones that like we're open about it, right? So if we're not confident that we're going to be able to actually close a deal, right? Because the price isn't where we want it to be, I let them know, like, listen, I don't know, we got a waterfront mobile home park development down in Panama City right now that we're working. And it's like, we wanted to be at one price, they wanted to be at the other. So we're just like, listen, like, as long as we can make it happen, we're totally okay. But I'm not getting the warm and fuzzies at this price. That's just how it is. And I generally don't like putting anything under agreement that I'm liable for, because I don't like coming back later and not being able to execute on my word. It's really important to us that we don't do that. However, because I know where you want to be at, right? And it might be possible. Let's go ahead and make this happen. Let's go under agreement, right? And that way we can legally start running title and doing all the things that we need to be able to do to make this work. And if for whatever reason, I just need to let you know that it might come to a point where this doesn't make sense for us. And at that point, maybe we got to, do whatever, but it's really me and you against the world to make this thing happen for you. And sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's like, okay, well, I was right. And then they're like, well, I just don't want to go below that. And most of those people still have their properties to this day, because they're just really set on that. And that's okay. But that's generally like that scenario is probably the one that happens the most. Yeah.
It's great you brought up that situation where you can't get everybody on board, and you buy out the other's interest. So by the time this gets put out there, it already would have been published and I'm going to go live. Not to say that I won't do it again. So anybody that will watch this, I'm definitely going to do another live segment on it again. But what you talked about is something a lot of people don't know. And it is something that I'm going to be getting into a lot more on the lawyer side or the legal side, which is partitions. And it's crazy because people will think, I found I got 5 people here, whether it's a probate or it's A, B, C, D, and E, all on the property. I got 4 of them to agree. I can't get E. Dead deal. I'm walking away. And people always think, oh, we need everybody. It's nice to have everybody, right? Like it makes it, fluffy and unicorns and rainbows. But the
Yeah.
times you can't, what you talked about is a lesser known strategy to investors that they should know, which again, I'm going to be talking about more. Talk to us a little bit about that, because that's the world of the partition. That's where you can say, look, I'll buy you out for each of your fourths and we'll handle the lawsuit. I'm going to give you a nice little, I'll give it to you now, and you'll convey me the deed and we'll handle the partition, the forcing of the sale out from E.
Right. Yeah. So what I think is cool about it, it's like one of my like, I don't know, like the deed stuff gives me the warm and fuzzies, primarily because like I'm a nerd in a couple different things. Like it's weird. I'll go hunting, but I also watch anime and I also, play video games. Like I'm like a man of like everything. I just do what I like to do, right?
Right.
And one of the things I love is like the train era is what I call it. Like when we were populating and just building, trains throughout the United States. And the reason why I think it's such a cool era, kind of a messed up era, in general, like between what was going on in the US at the time, but like in general, like specifically talking about D's, what was really cool is like, you would buy stocks and take over, parcels of land and companies and ownership. And it was like well, it's kind of called the wild, wild west, I guess, in general, but it's like quite literally the wild, wild west when it comes to like ownership of rights. And a lot of people don't realize that those laws aren't just like non-extinct. They've been regulated quite a bit now, especially in the stock world. But like to be able to say, hey, listen, uh, it's about ownership. It's about my name's on the paper as majority owner, right? And if I can get my name on paper, right, then I can have the ability to execute based on that ownership right. So you could do this to save auctions from happening. You could do this in probate situations. You could do this if someone has a bad relationship and they want to get out of it, like you were saying before, and then that's kind of a selling point. And you can also do this for like pre-foreclosure cases, right? Like let's just say someone's going into pre-foreclosure. It's a game, right? It's like, okay, cool. You're $7,000 behind in pre-foreclosures. I will give you 7 grand, but I want all the equity in your home, right? And you could literally build your net worth based off of notes, and having this equity interest. And if they were to ever sell in the future, it doesn't matter. Let's just say they had 40% equity, but they're 7,000 behind in their mortgage. Say, okay, I'll give you 7 grand, but I want the 40%. You can keep anything between now and then, or you can't, depending on the situation. But I'm going to have that. And now, yes, you have 7 grand tied up, and you do have no different. You have a second lien. I'm pretty sure is what it would be, a second lien on the the property, because the mortgage is going to have the first. But again, if anything ever happens, you still do have the ability to do legal rights, and if they ever sell, you can make that money. But more importantly, you can leverage, that equity that you have in those properties. Like things like that. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with deeds. It makes me really excited because there's so much unknown possibilities. And there's a lot of guys that have like just a bazooka, like a crap ton of like ownership and just like 5% here, 10% there, 20% here. And they just like super wealthy and they own, like have like equitable interest in like just a crap ton of properties. It blows my mind.
Lee Kearney, I saw a video that he did probably a month or so ago, and it had like one like, probably a few views, and I'm like, that is valuable info. A very few understand it, and like it's crazy good hearing it from somebody like you, because like even in my world, I see it so I see that exact world, but we all have different perspectives on how to get it done or where to get it done. It's like you can have 10 people on that title and you can buy out just one
Yep.
and get it. I'll give you $1,000, and then you have the fair market value of that being 6 or 7,000, and so you push it to a public auction. Okay, so you don't get the house, but you get the cash because you get the
Right.
money, and then everybody's got to split the partition cost. But it's so interesting hearing that, and I'm really glad you brought that up. I don't think you and I were both like prepared to talk about that, but
Yeah.
this is valuable, Tyler. People again. I encourage you. I mean, I'm gonna put it on. I think I'm gonna do it tomorrow, and I'll go live on the Facebook feed. But I love hearing the perspective of what the investors see versus okay, it's all about law and legal. But like, what happens on the ground level? Like, what are you looking at from your angle that you're trying to do? Right? Everybody's trying to see the mind. So
Yeah.
and anybody that is thinking about this, that's watching this, that is curious, not just on the legal side of how this is done, but the practical side, reach out to Tyler. And hey, I don't know, maybe you'll JV with somebody on this or say,
Yeah. There
hey,
you go.
you don't want to handle it, I'll handle it. I'll give you the finder's fee and I'll handle it.
Yep.
So anyway, look, Tyler, this has been awesome. And I mean, people are going to love this. How do people get in touch with you? How do people reach out to you about all this stuff?
Yeah, so the best place to reach me is on Instagram. Actually, I prefer voice messages. I always say because I'm more personable than just like kind of like the messages generally on Instagram. It's easier for me to just press the button, respond. But it's Tyler Austin Original on IG. I think that's also my Facebook, but you can search me on Facebook, Tyler Austin. I think I'm probably the one that'll pop up. Other than that, most of my energy is spent in like the REISIFT community, which is I don't know. I guess it's a shameless plug. It's my platform that I literally do everything with. I built the platform around my tactics in properly managing data. So that's where most of my energy is on. So like if you reach out to me asking about those tactics and things like that, I'll probably just throw you into training, that I've already done and not like spend too much time on it because I'm a strong believer in, if you want it, you'll find it kind of scenario. So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anybody you're looking out for, I don't know if there's anybody specifically you're looking for, feel free to make that shout out if you like.
Yeah. So people that I'm really looking to network more with is just other successful entrepreneurs in general. People that are achieving success. In general, no matter what it is, whether it's maybe you're another attorney that's listening to this, or you're an engineer that's just really good at their craft. I don't really care what you do. I just am a huge believer in the merging of minds, and so if you do something really cool, love to have a conversation with you and talk about whatever it is you're good at.
And you heard it best from him. If you got anything like that, reach out to Tyler. Wealth of knowledge, wealth of information. Hey, before we take off, probate. Any crazy probate stories, successes, nightmares, anything that can be valuable to people. We know probate. People have heard it takes months. I've really demystified the whole thing. It doesn't really take that long.
Right.
What do you have?
I have kind of two. One of our I already touched on. We had an individual we bought a property from, and then in the middle of our second purchase with him, he passed away 3 days before closing, and we had to deal with all that. We ended up getting it. I think ended up getting it taken care of roughly within, I think it was like maybe 2 months or so, something like that. Thankfully, he had a will we were able to use, so that cleaned it up quite a bit more. And that was like the court's what really slowed it down the most. But that's one that was a really scary thing. It was a $90,000 deal, so it was like a huge, like when I get a phone call from my title company saying, "Hey, I think something might happen to this individual. He might have passed away." I'm like to feel. And here's the crazy thing is I was buying the property for 10 grand. Like I knew it was clean because I already did title work against him.
Right.
So I already knew with a huge amount of doubt, like the chance that it wasn't, it was 10 grand either way. Right.
Right.
I should have, knowing what I know now, just bought the property. Right. I knew what I could have sold it for. I should have just gave him the 10 grand. Instead, we waited for title. We were debating on if we wanted to keep it. So we were looking to see if we wanted to exit as a, wholesale tactic. I should have just paid for the thing. So knowing I could have just paid for it and just bought it, even quick claim deed, and not even let him had to move leave the house. And then he dies. I'm thinking like, well, shoot, man, it was a really, really big learning experience for me, how to like think about, the ways and how to leverage my money that I have sitting and how it could have been better have done. But anyway, that would have eliminated a lot of time. And I could have put that money to work to make more money. Anyway, outside of that, and I'm not saying that you should just buy properties, by the way, y'all, without doing title work. But we had already bought a property from him. Just always make sure you do title work, do your QC. The second one is one that we've yet to close right now. And they want to sell. I've been working with them for a while. In fact, Zach is in this other room over here. He's our customer success manager, and he's another investor here in the local area, doing awesome stuff. And he's the one that bring the deal to my attention. What was it, like a year and a half ago now, Zach? It's been like boys. Like a year and a half ago now. Okay. And we were under contract. We were working on it. Kept extending the contract. The attorney that basically started the probate process, like they didn't pay him, or so he just basically stopped. And all the attorneys in the area will not take over the case. They refuse to take over a case that another attorney, I don't know if it's like I don't know. It was
Doctor already did surgery.
Yeah,
not
kind of
doing a
thing.
second
Yeah,
operation.
yeah. Like I don't really know why, but they filed this document and that document. I'm like, listen, this is what you need. Like the attorneys I've used that done probate for me in the past, like that, I know what we need to get done. You have a will, this, that, and the other. If you just do this, we can close this thing in like 15 days right now. But this other attorney's like, no, we got to do this, that, and the other. And he went through this whole nother rabbit hole. Then we had to wait for that. I don't even know where it stands right now. I put it, my TC simply just follows up with them and over and over and over. And we just keep the beat on it until finally we get clear title. This is a crazy thing about this one though. They're even on the deed already. The seller, the owner of the mom and the daughter, the mom and the daughter, or the daughter and the niece, one or the other, they're on the deed already because they were willed the property. So they're on the deed. And the reason we're not getting clear title is even though they're on the deed, probate was never fully finished or something. So they won't give clear title, but their name's on the deed. That's what really bothered me about it. It's like their name's already on the deed. So they're on the deed. Why would probate need to be finished to get clear title insurance? I don't know. So it's a weird one. Maybe that's one you and I need to talk about. But
yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear about it because, when I'm doing the probate work, I'm always working with the title company, the situation. We try, I've learned so much this year, Tyler. I've had about 90 probates that I've done. Yeah, it's been a lot this year. 2020 has been awesome and weird, right? So I've done about 90 of these, and I've learned more and more. Stop making it so complicated and find the easiest way to get this done, even if the probate wise, even if it means you got to track these people down to get deeds, because it's never going to get done. It's never going to get closed. And that's crazy. We had somebody was calling me about back a couple months ago, and lawyer had the file. It got started. There was issues with the will. There wasn't a witness, and they needed an oath, and nothing was moving. And so they were like, "What do you think?" And eventually, that heir called me and was like, "Hey, what do I do?" And I was like, if I don't have the docs, if I can't see what's going on, the lawyer wasn't providing her anything.
Right.
I mean, she wasn't getting any information. She was getting no information about what was happening. And it was like, it's hard for me to answer, because if you're not getting info or somebody's not telling you something, what do you do? And then
Right.
title's telling you one thing. So wow, that's crazy you went through that. I mean, I'm kind of wondering, it's like, you got me curious. Like, was there a homestead order, which that was the deed, or was it like a personal representative's deed?
Well, no, it's a normal, from what I remember, it's a normal warranty deed, and homestead was never originally filed, right? For the will to have, I think that was what ended up being the problem, is like they were on the deed, but the will wasn't enforceable because homestead was never filed. So like, or something like that. Like that's what they were saying. Like the will wasn't enforceable because their name's on there, they have it in their name, but they wouldn't they wouldn't give clear title because the other heirs after we closed could have came back and said that that will wasn't proper, like it wasn't legally enforceable.
That's crazy. So yeah, man. I mean, you get these situations sometimes with probate, but hopefully whenever you get another one, if it's not this one, but you'll see that it's not that crazy. They don't usually get that crazy.
Yeah, no, every other one that I've had has been really clean. They've some of them taken a little bit longer than I thought they should. Things like that, having to educate the attorney on the situation that's going on, because they're not really. It's not the only thing they like. There's not very many like only probate attorneys here. So there's a lot of like, if you feel like you're educating them on like what needs to be done based off what you're finding out from like other people and other investors, and um, yeah, it's been, probates are a fun ride, that's for sure.
Oh, they are. I can't. Hey, they are money makers, and if you get a good one, there was a guy, investor. He got a great deal in Nassau County. It was almost like 100 grand equity, and it was a probate. So
Love it.
you can find those. They're there. But yeah,
Probate,
man.
out of
Hey,
state PRs, inheriteds, like they're all beautiful, you
well,
know.
yeah, and that's the thing, is that the inheritance leads are valuable leads because of the partition stuff. So you may find that the probate's done, and that title's in air 1, 2, and 3, but probate's done. It'll go, "Hey, Tyler, it's done." But sister's living in the property. She
Yeah.
doesn't want to
Oh
cooperate,
man.
but two of us do. Ding,
Yeah.
ding, ding. So those are great leads, as long as you're willing to say, "Look, it's not going to take 2 to 4 days. It's going
Yeah.
to be 5, maybe 6 months, but we'll get somewhere."
Right. Yeah. I'm willing to play the long game. I mean, it's like, on especially on certain deals, I don't look at things as monthly revenue in real estate. It's like I look at my annual. I look at like, hey, I'm smart enough with my money. Now I wasn't in before. Where I'm like, cool, like I'll get a deal. I'll put flips under, and like I just project my revenue. I don't rely on it. It's a big thing. I don't rely on projections, right? Keep hustling, keep working. But like I'll put something under, and it's just cool. Like that just means that if it closes in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, maybe even next year, right? It just means that, my company's still producing this trickle in revenue. And at a certain point, what's beautiful about it, especially if you don't have money involved in it, but it's, you've already spent that marketing cost and made your ROI back. So it's literally pretty much free money at that point. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. If you find the right deals, you find the right leads, they're gonna make you money somehow.
Yeah.
Depending on how much, or the spread's gonna be really big.
Right.
It all varies. You never know. So, hey man, awesome having you. I mean, there was no better way to actually finally meet than to have this kind of conversation. And I think we got plenty of stuff filled in, and I'm sure many more discussions later down the road, even off this. So Tyler,
Yep.
thanks for taking your time out on this Tuesday, and really sharing your knowledge. And again, anybody out there watching, reach out to Tyler for this stuff. He's got great wealth of knowledge on this. So again, thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Dude, I appreciate it. Any of my community will be the first to say I can have very long lungs filled up real tight, and when I get talking, I can keep the air coming really for quite a long time. So I appreciate the ability to kind of share some knowledge, and if anyone needs anything, feel free to reach out, and we'll definitely continue to keep in touch. In fact, have you over in our community, maybe shed some light too.
I would love that. I will. You
Yeah.
got any of the RIAs or anybody like that? I'd love to come there, share knowledge. I'm always available for that kind of stuff. So
Yep.
definitely would take you up on
100%.
that. Yeah, for sure, man. I really appreciate it again. Hey, everybody. Look, if you want more content like this, check out my Al Nicoletti YouTube channel. I got the podcast with Tyler. I got tons of videos, different things on probate, the podcast, different content. Share your experiences, comment below on the videos. There's tons of information. And just remember, it's not about always finding deals, but taking massive actions so deals find you. That's what it's all about. That's how it happens. And I'll see you next time on the Al Nicoletti Show.